My name is Jim, and we're going to be talking about this Makita right angle drill today on
Kilimanjaro.
This is the Makita XAD05 drill. Makita calls this a right angle drill. Other manufacturers have different names. DeWalt calls it a stud and joist drill. Milwaukee gets fancy and calls it a whole hog. Regardless of what they call it, it's all basically the same thing. It's just a drill that goes at a right angle here and has a big handle here and a big handle here. These drills are designed for driving drill bits that take a lot of torque to use. Something like this guy here, this is an auger bit that has a big screw on the front that really pulls it into the wood. These go very fast, but they take a lot of torque to drive. Or something like a big hole saw like this. I'll get into why that is and why this design works well for that sort of bit in a little bit here, but that's what these are designed for. Let's talk about what you get in the box here. You get the drill itself. Now this drill comes in two different variations, either one with a regular chuck here. This is a keyed chuck, which you don't see too much anymore. The reason for that is the keyless chucks that you would normally just grab with your hand like this. You can't clamp down on the bits tight enough for a lot of these like bigger bits like this. They'll end up spinning in the chuck, and then that wrecks the bit, and it's not great for the chuck. So they put a keyed chuck on here. Makita makes another version of this drill, the XAD06, that has a quick change collet for 7/16 inch bits. So that's this bigger style here. This is your typical 1/4 inch that you might see like in an impact driver. This one's quite a bit bigger, 7/16, once again for that higher torque limit. So they also make a version of that with a regular, quick chuck like you would see on an impact driver or something like that. These will just drop straight in. I chose the one with the regular chuck in here because while I do have a bunch of bits like this that have the 7/16, I have a bunch that only have the 1/4 inch or even just regular size drill bits that I might want to be using in here as well. So I get a little bit more versatility with this style of chuck at the expense of now I need a chuck key for this, which I can lose. It's a lot more time consuming to change the bits in here. So it's a compromise one way or the other. In the box, you also get a bag here. Now, the bag is kind of this teal color that Makita used to use, as opposed to this blue color. Not sure why they aren't giving the same size bag. The other issue with the bag is that the drill doesn't really fit in it, particularly if you've got a battery on the bottom. It doesn't fit in it so well, so not the most useful bag in the world. Wish they had put the next size up bag in here. This would fit a lot better, particularly if you're going to leave the batteries on. It would be a lot better. That's really all you get. One other oddity though is that the chuck key mount does not come attached to it. You have to screw that in. Not sure why that is. Not really a big deal. Only takes a second or two, but that's to note. The other thing is there is screws on each side for a handle. They don't give you a handle in the box though. I assume it's the same handle that fits any of the Makita grinders. So if you have one of those, it should fit in here. It's an M8 thread. It's not the same as a DeWalt grinder or a Milwaukee grinder or a Hitachi grinder. Those are all 3/8 threads. So keep that in mind. If you've got a Makita grinder or you want to get the handle, you can probably find one on Amazon. They're not going to be that expensive. Let's talk about the features on the drill itself. I've already talked about the chuck a little bit. It's got two little LEDs right here that shine on your work. Very handy if you're working in the dark to be able to see what you're doing. It does only illuminate one side of it, and the light is pretty far away. Being pretty far away means you get a nice angle on it, but it also means that if there's something in the way here, it's going to block that light. So it would be nicer if there was, in addition to these two LEDs, a couple LEDs up here, really get you some more light on what you're working on. These are nice and bright though, very easy to see what you're doing if you're in the dark. The other thing of note is this big joist hanger down here at the bottom. I particularly like this one. It's got a nice mechanism up the top here to keep it locked and uptight if it's, so it's not in your way. And it's also got this little loop on the bottom. Most of the other joist hangers I've seen from like DeWalt, it's just a straight bar across the bottom. This gives it a little bit of a flex. It means that if it's just hanging by the point here, which is how I'll frequently just hang it from something, it's got a little bit of bounce. It's less likely to vibrate and kind of fall off. Also means that if you can put a lanyard right here and that'll stay on securely. So I like that they did that here, and I really like that mechanism that sits there. On the bottom here, you have your 2-speed switch. I don't like this switch mostly because it's never clear if you go like that to change the speeds or if you go like this. So you can't turn it this way, but I frequently will try to turn it this way rather than turn it this way. I wish they had come up with some other design just so it was obvious that, which way you want to be turning it. It'd be a little easier to use. Not really a big deal though. The other thing, you got your typical forward-reverse right here. You've got a rubberized coating up here in case it were to drop and land on here. Probably going to be okay. If it drops this way, it might break this handle, but this is easily replaced, so that's not a big deal. If it drops on the chuck, though, you're probably screwed. That's probably going to break that and be the end of the drill here. You can replace this. Makita does have parts available, so you could probably replace that if need be. And this chuck, one other thing, that the rest of the drill is made in China, but the chuck is made in Japan, so it's a pretty nice high quality chuck. Let's talk a little bit about why this design is so good for high torque drill bits. So torque is just the amount of twisting force that's getting put onto something, in this case a drill bit. The torque is the multiplication of the force times the distance. So if you have a large distance, a lot of force, that's going to be a lot of torque. If you have a short distance, not so much force, it's a little bit of torque. And those two multiply together, so it's an even contribution from both of those. So for instance, if you want a lot of torque, you can put a huge lever arm on the end there, something like a breaker bar to get your lug nuts loose on your car. That's going to give you a lot of torque. If you only have a small breaker bar or just a ratchet, you're not going to get nearly as much torque. It's going to be a lot harder to get those lug nuts off. So when you're drilling, if you're using a regular drill like this, it's not going to have that much torque that is required on it. The distance is pretty small, and the amount of force it takes to at the tip of it is not going to be that large either, because the feed rate of this drill bit is just dependent on how hard you're pushing. So if it starts to bind and you're not able to control that torque, you can always just back up on the feed rate a little bit. With a bit like this, it's a much wider bit, so this is going to take a lot more torque because you get a larger distance there. But once again, because this is just the feed rate is dependent on how hard you're pushing on it, it's not going to be that much torque. It's not going to be too unmanageable. On this bit here, the feed rate is not dependent on how much you push on it. It's dependent on the coarseness of these threads in here, or the fineness as it is. These have very coarse threads, so it pulls very quickly. That puts a lot of force on the end of here, and so even though this isn't that large diameter, this is a 7/8 inch drill bit, it still takes a lot of torque to drive this. With a hole saw, something like this, it doesn't take a huge amount of force at the edge here, but because the diameter is so large, it ends up putting out a whole lot of torque to drive this as well. Now, for every reaction, there's an equal and opposite reaction, so however much torque these drill bits are requiring, you've got to react that somehow. So if you've just got a regular drill, something like this here, that gets reacted in your wrist here. Now, the distance between the two bones in your wrist, what your muscles are working on, is not that large. It's maybe an inch or two. So that's the whole distance you have to react that torque. You can increase that, add another hand up here, and then you've got a much larger reaction arm, so that's going to be better. But that can be a little bit awkward. It also makes it a little more difficult if you're doing something to use two hands. You can increase it even further if you get a drill like this that has a handle on the end. Now I've got a really large distance between here, and that makes it a lot easier to use a drill like this. You can control it a lot better. But this gets to be pretty awkward. You've got this large handle sticking out. If you're trying to drill in a cavity, it's going to get in the way and everything. So this is not ideal, although it is a fairly inexpensive solution to help you be able to put out a lot more torque. So this drill, on the other hand, you typically will hold it up here like this, and then another hand down here. You get this huge distance here, almost a foot, to react that torque with. So it's going to be a lot easier, a lot more stable, a lot easier to control these high torque drill bits. So that's why this design is much more preferable. The fact that it's a right angle design, it's kind of it competes with another type of right angle drill bit, which is really meant, or right angle drill, which was really meant for getting in tight places. This isn't so much meant for getting in tight places, although particularly if you take this handle off, it is pretty short compared to this guy here. It's a lot shorter, so that can help you get into tight places. But that's not really what this is meant for. It's really meant to be able to control it under high torque applications. All right, let's actually drill some holes here. So first, I'm going to use this spade bit with the screws on the top here. I really like these. They feed nice and quickly. They make nice clean holes. So we're just going to put this in here, take the chuck key out, comes out, chuck it down. Now it would be a good idea to chuck this in all three positions here, but this size bit doesn't really need it, so I'm not going to bother. Alright, and here I've got a mock-up of a stud wall here. This is a 16-inch on center bay, so you can see this has plenty of room to fit in there, works real nice. So this, on the other side here, this bay you can see it doesn't fit in. Now if I really wanted to, I could unscrew this handle here if I really needed a nice straight hole. Most of the time that's not going to matter. You just come in at a little angle here, or use even a longer bit so you can get in at a shallow angle. But if you really needed to, you could get in there a little bit tighter than you could with a regular drill. So it is kind of handy that way. So let's go from this side here. We're going to start down here. In forward in the 2-speed, the faster speed, and we'll go down here. You can see, no problem, works really well, really easy to control. All right, I've switched out bits here. This is a speed bore auger bit with the screw on the end here. These go really fast, but they can be kind of hard to control. So that works just fine too. Still easy to deal with on a drill like this. These are nice because they've got a nice thick cutting edge here, so if you hit a screw or something, they'll tend to go right through that. It's also easy enough to resharpen. It's only got the one cutting edge. Hit it with a file, sharpens it right up. All right, let's try it with this hole saw here. This is a 4 1/4 inch hole saw. I've used this hole saw with a regular drill before, and it can be a real bear. Puts out a lot of torque, particularly if it catches at the end. It can rip right out of your hand. So with this drill, it should be a lot nicer to do. Let's give it a shot here. Apologize that my shoulder might get in your way here. I had to come around to the other side of the workbench so you could see what I'm doing here. So you can see that went through there real easily. It didn't rip out of my hand when it started to go through. A lot of times in hole saws, when they start to just cut through the end, they grab and it can rip right out of your hand. This didn't do that. Real nice and easy to control when using a hole saw like that. This was just 1/2 inch plywood here, nothing exciting though. That's how the drill works and what's nice about it. Let's talk about the other side of the coin here, some of the irritants I have with it and some of the things I don't like so much. So the first thing is the overall build quality of this is not great. Where this housing meets this housing, the gap is very inconsistent. It's very tight here and then very loose up here. None of the plastics on this match. None of them are the same color. This blue is a little bit different than this blue here. The blacks are all different colors. This black is a shiny black. The rest of the blacks are matte black. There's a big gap between the two pieces right here. Like I said, not gonna be a game changer or anything, but it's just an irritation that, the build quality here is just not exactly what I would have expected from Makita. The other big thing is this chuck key here. So not the key itself, but the holder. So the way you get the key out, you flip it up, slide it down, and then pull it up. So it's like 3 actions to get that chuck key out. More irritatingly, when you put it back in, because this is an offset, it's not the same length on each side, you have to make sure that the long end goes into the end that has a hole. So this side has a hole, this side does not. So you have to slide that long end down there and slide it back up and flip it down. It's just an extra irritation when you're trying to change drill bits. The nice thing about it is it does hold it very securely on there and it's not going to fall out accidentally, so that's nice. This seems like it was just in general just an afterthought though. It just screws on with a single screw and it's kind of not integrated with the rest of the unit, so not a big fan of that. The other thing that I already mentioned was this switch here that, like just now, I frequently try to spin it the other way and it won't go. You got to turn it this way for it to go. And then lastly, this has a very large fan in it. It's very noisy and it blows a lot of air. So you can hear it there. There's no real way for me to show just how much air it's putting out. It's a lot more than any of the other drills I have. Now that's probably good for longevity. The more air, it's going to cool more. It's probably better about blowing dust out of it if it does get in there, although it does probably suck more dust in. But on the other hand, I've had it where I'm in a small cavity, it's drilling holes, making chips, and for whatever reason the orientation is that fan blows them right in my face. Not the nicest thing in the world, but once again, not a game changer, and it may have some benefits as well. Now the retail price on this is quite expensive at $340. One thing about Makitas compared to, say, Milwaukee and DeWalt's, they don't seem to go on sale nearly as frequently as those other two brands. The other two brands, you can frequently get a deal either where it comes with some batteries or get 2 tools or something like that, and you save a ton of money doing that. That seems much less frequent for Makitas. I was able to, however, find a really good deal for this one particularly. I got 2 4-amp-hour batteries plus the drill for $260, so that was a fantastic deal. If you just are buying the bare drill, though, at retail, it costs about 10%, maybe 20% more than the equivalents from DeWalt or Milwaukee, and I don't think that price is really justified. The build quality on here, if anything, it's worse than those other 2 brands. It's certainly not substantially better. It's made in China. It's not like it's a made in Japan tool or something like that. So at the end of the day, you can get a good deal for it. If you're already in the Makita system, it's perfectly fine, perfectly reasonable tool. If you have multiple batteries or you happen to get a good deal on one of those other brands, I would probably go for one of those over this drill instead. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below.